After trying to gain independence from Tsarist rule during the Russian Revolution and Civil War period of 1917 and 20, Ukraine became a part of the Soviet Union. During this time period, large farms and culture flourished in Ukraine, but this success soon ended due to the fact that Stalin, leader of the USSR, saw them as a threat to the newly formed Soviet Union. In the 1930s, Stalin deliberately wiped out the Ukrainian Orthodox Church as well as Ukrainian writers, teachers, and affluent people in society. The farmers that were resisting communism were dealt with a mortal blow. From 1928 to 1933, Stalin's 5-year plan took place. Independent farmers were forced to give up their tools, crops, and livestock without receiving anything in return. The Soviet government especially attacked wealthy farmers by forcing them through deportation, concentration camps, and firing squads. Any resistance from farmers who were fighting communism were met with brutal force from secret police. Red Army units also collected all of the food found in village houses. Because the government sealed Ukraine's borders, made strict restrictions on traveling to places with more food, and punished those who attempted to flee, somewhere between 530,000 and 3 million Ukrainians died from starvation forced onto them by Stalin and the Soviet government. To ensure that the government would not sympathize with the people of Ukraine, Stalin substituted foreigners for Ukrainians as representatives in the government system.
The Ukrainian famine was never officially recognized by the USSR, and inside the country the famine was never mentioned. All discussion was actively repressed, and some statistics were even altered to hide it. The terror was so overwhelming that the silence was complete. Outside the country, however, the cover-up required different, subtler tactics. However, despite constant efforts to oppress the truth of what was happening, places like the U.S., with freedom of press, were constantly aware of the mass genocide that was happening. During the Ukrainian genocide, there was much resistance. Sporadic armed uprisings involving whole districts took place, especially in Ukraine. But shotguns could not prevail against the armed forces of the GPU. They were ruthlessly suppressed. However, the peasants had more peaceful resistance that were more successful. There was an astonishing women's rebellion, where peasant women would prevent confiscation of their cows, and the authorities would often have a loss of how to cope. The peasants' main reaction, however, was to slaughter the cattle.
It had been Soviet policy to maintain informal denial of wrongdoing and inacceptance that the Holodomor actually happened. The USSR actually claimed for a time that the famine had happened naturally and was not man-made. This was all false. Because it was considered a crime to talk about, learn, or educate others about the incident of the Holodomor until 1991, it was only through refugees that the West learned about the terrible incidents of the genocide. The question remains, why would a whole group of people be killed through starvation? Many historians theorize that the Holodomor was an act put in place to completely subjugate the Ukrainians under Soviet rule and display the power of the Soviet Union.
If history has taught the world anything, it's how to look for signs. Signs like racism, discrimination, racial profiling, sexism, ageism, and any other form of oppression. By discovering these issues early on, hopefully humanity will be able to become educated and learn that living by these values will possibly build up to huge social crises. So in order for the world to avoid tragedies of the past, we must be fully educated and fully aware of negative effects and inhumanity involved in a genocide. By being aware of these historical tragedies and events, the world will hopefully understand the signs to look for, in hope to prevent mass murders and genocides like the Holocaust and Holodomor.